It is known that wildfires behave unpredictably. This is fundamental, but it is my experience that humans in the presence of wildfire are also likely to behave in aberrant and unpredictable ways. Michael Leunig, Australian cartoonist, poet, and artist. All right, welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. For tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time. Okay, folks, so we're running into all kind of issues here, but I think we've worked out all the major ones. So we had some audio issues going on there, and then before that, I had some camera issues, and it's being very, very difficult. Technology is not in my favor today. So anyway, we're past that. Today, I am bringing on Lars Mapstead. He previously ran for the presidential nominee for the Libertarian Party, and he is coming. He is joining me today to discuss the wildfires in California because he lives in California and I live in Florida. If you ask about hurricanes, I can tell you a lot. If you ask me about wildfires, I can tell you very little. And since I'm on the other side of the country, dealing with many of my own issues over here, from legislation to natural disasters and everything else, technology issues, I figured I would bring on somebody that's at least from the area who would be knowledgeable enough to kind of give us the lowdown on what's going on, talk about the legislation, all of that good stuff. So please welcome Lars as he comes in to discuss this wildfire issue. And let me see if I can't. Let's see here. I think we're good to go. Might have some audio problems. Let me see. Lars, how are you? All right, I got your audio muted. I think somebody does. I'm not sure.
Me
There it
I
is.
fixed it.
All right, you are good to go. Okay,
Awesome, thanks
man,
for
we
having me.
we will get past all of this. Okay, so first and foremost, before we dive into the wildfires, you ran for president for the Libertarian Party. We don't need to rehash all of that, but I am curious because we had a conversation earlier prior to this. When I reached out to you, and what I'm curious, and what the audience members may be curious, is what have you been up to since then?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of was looking for my next thing. I don't like to sit still for very long. My brain
Mhm,
goes crazy, and I'm always so I've got a lot of investments and a lot of other activities, racing and family, and all kinds of stuff. But as far as liberty movement is going, I was trying to look around and see what can I do with my time that would be most effective
mhm,
in moving forward liberty and moving forward my agenda for fixing what's broken in this country. And I really kind of settled on ballot access because we had that success in Maine in
mhm,
getting ballot access for Maine. And after talking to a bunch of people, I realized that we could actually attack ballot access in different states, and that we could affect the change and get more easier ballot access and more kind of streamlined ballot access for third parties, independent candidates, whatever, just so that we have more choices, on the ballot.
mhm,
And so I started a nonprofit called the Voting Rights Foundation, which is going to basically be an educational nonprofit around my Voters Bill of Rights that came out of my campaign, which
mhm,
is five pieces of policy to kind of unrig our election systems and make them more transparent and fair. But then in starting up that nonprofit, I learned that I can't do legislation or lobbying as a nonprofit. The government doesn't want to give you a tax cut to go against them, I guess. So I had to join up with another group that is a more like a political action committee, and that's called More Voter Choice.
mhm,
And More Voter Choice is a group of lawyers who are basically suing different states to get ballot access, along with Richard Winger, who does ballot access news, and Bill Redpath, who's a longtime advocate for ballot access, and Larry Sharp is also involved. So we have a pretty good team of people going at that, and we're going to be heading to Washington D.C. in a week
Mhm.
for a Secretary of State conference where I'm going to be speaking to secretaries of state to try to show them two pieces of information that I've come up with. One is a ballot access index, which ranks each state based on a number of criteria on whether they suck really bad or they suck only kind of bad, because none of
Mhm.
them are really good.
Okay.
And then we have a another piece which is basically what we feel is the ideal ballot access, to kind of streamline it across the country and get every state to kind of adopt similar ballot access, because um, um, Fina Benoa, she was running there in Florida, right?
Mhm.
And before that, she had run in Hawaii. And in Hawaii, for her position that she was trying to run for, it was like $35 fee. And then when she ran for the same position in Florida, it was like $5,000 or 10,000, some ridiculous sum of money, right? For the same exact position. So the idea here is to kind of get all the states in line and kind of cyberbully them with this ballot access index to show that, California and New York are among some of the worst states, and Alaska and Idaho are among some of the best states, and try to move them up the ladder in the ballot access index.
Gotcha. Now, I think that sounds pretty wonderful. I'm just curious, and we don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I'm just curious. I know there are libertarians in the Libertarian Party, and then also some libertarians just in the movement per se. Maybe they're not as active in the party. Um, they tend to look down upon, any significant efforts toward ballot access. So, what do you say to critics who would kind of say, "Yeah, maybe we really shouldn't prioritize ballot access for whatever reason they have"?
Yeah, well, that's why I'm not doing this inside the Libertarian Party.
Okay.
This is funded by me.
Hmm.
I don't have to go to any committee or get anybody's approval, which is my favorite thing in life, because I don't
Hmm.
really like getting approval from anybody. That's partly why I'm a libertarian.
Right. Right.
And so, this is literally not just for the Libertarian Party. This is for anyone, because ideally, like, I believe that people shouldn't have to run as a party member. Like, you should, like, there's reasons why people join parties is literally just to get the ballot access to the party. I mean, we saw that with Kennedy coming towards the Libertarian Party, right? And it shouldn't have to be that way. If you want to run as an independent, you should be able to just file your paperwork the same as a Republican or a Democrat and just be running. And you shouldn't have to like join a party in order to uh, run for office. That's ridiculous to me. So this is really nonpartisan, and it's really just trying to get ballot access across the board for anybody in America reduced. And one of the reasons why I really picked this was because there's a bunch of things I'd love to do inside the Libertarian Party, and I have a bunch of ideas, but getting those through the machinations of the Libertarian Party is just so painful, and it almost feels like a little bit of a waste of time,
Mhm.
because you might do all this work and put all this effort in, and then for political reasons be shot down.
Mm.
And so I chose this avenue to really be able to affect change. Like I said, I was looking, how can I affect the most change, right? And I think this is the way to do it. I mean, if I got ballot access laws across the nation to be uniform and easy, I would feel wholly fulfilled with my political ambitions.
Awesome. I love it. And that's a really libertarian answer to say, basically, my time, my money, I'll do what I want. Right? Very quickly here. And I just learned this, like I was just clicking on some things while you were talking. So I can actually put things up on the screen now. So this is cool. That Liberty Lady says, do you have a website for ballot access that you are working with?
Yeah, we're in the process of redoing it, but the current website is called, let me hold on, morevoterchoicefund.com or .org.
Mhm.
Yeah, one of those two. More Voter Choice Fund. And so yeah, and we're in the process. We're going to actually have a new website probably next week for that.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I will keep that in mind and I will put it in the show notes once we get that. So let's move on now to why you're here. I think that's great that you're still active. Unfortunately, way too many candidates at any level They come in, they run for office, and then you don't really hear much about what they're doing, whether it's preparing for their next run
Yeah.
or moving on to some other venture that, like you said, really speaks to their heart. And I find that kind of disappointing. So I'm glad to hear that you are remaining active.
Yeah, I think part of it is just burnout. I mean,
Mhm.
that couple of years that I ran for president, that was the hardest I've ever worked in my life. I never have put in that kind of work. I mean, especially the last 6 months, I
Mhm.
didn't see my family. I was on the road constantly. I was working 80 hours a week. I was, up at 6 and going to bed at 11 o'clock, and having
Mhm.
worked that entire time, right, doing shows and talking to people and hustling, and 35 states of travel to all the. I mean, it's burnout's real. So like
Right.
to and then if you add to that a feeling of like that you were maybe blocked at every turn, or that that you weren't like champion just for running. Like, to me, if you just run for office, you're like doing a service to the liberty movement, and you should be applauded regardless of anything else.
Mhm.
And it feels like especially this was my personal experience, is you go to some states and they're openly hostile to you before you've even walked through the door. And that
Right.
doesn't make you feel like, wow, I really want to like do this, and I kind
Right.
of came into the whole thing a little naive, thinking that the Libertarian Party was like a kumbaya, everybody's together on the same page to go kick ass on the duopoly and crush them. And it just, that really wasn't my experience. So I
Mhm.
can see why people fade out and get burnt out and do things. But for me personally, I, I want to affect some kind of national change in our political space. And so this makes sense for me to do this.
Awesome. Well, it sounds good, and I wish you luck, and hopefully you will see some very tangible and clear, unambiguous results from your hard work.
Yep.
So let's move into this wildfire business. So, like I said, I'm here in Florida. I've visited California a time or two. No, so I understand a few things. Like, I understand that it's really dry out there. I understand some very simple things. You've got to remove brush and stuff like that. So there's management that has to take place. Otherwise, if you don't, then you can have a very destructive wildfire. Some of these other things. So if you would kind of start with us on, like, what is known about the current wildfires, particularly as much as you can about like how and where they started.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this isn't really new.
Mhm.
In 2020, we had the Northern California fires, and an entire town called Paradise was disappeared off the map.
Mhm.
Along with other towns. And when you saw the destruction, it was very similar to the stuff you're seeing on TV right now from the Southern California wildfires. But this was Northern California, where it's not as dry, and it's more, it's greener, and there we get more rain. So it's I think it's just partly it's a little bit like when you have hurricanes. You can't really like stop a hurricane, and
Mhm.
one season might be a really big season, and another season might not be so big, and there's not really a way for you to affect that thing. And so it's similar with wildfires. They just, when the conditions are all perfect, they, then there's a big problem. And so this particular fire was primarily a wind driven event.
Okay.
They had winds that were abnormally strong, and combine that with the dry brush and that sort of stuff. But if you look at some of the houses that burned right along the ocean,
Mhm.
there's no trees, there's no brush to clear. They're literally on the sand on another side of a highway. So
Mhm.
there's not even like brush to like go up to their house. It was that the wind was so strong that it was blowing giant fireballs at people's houses. And your house just is not going to withstand that. Even stucco houses were going up because the heat was so intense from this firestorm that was going on. So there's a little bit of that, but that doesn't like absolve the government from a bunch of other issues that they've caused to exacerbate this situation, right?
Mhm.
And they didn't learn their lesson in 2020. They are not going to learn their lesson now. They didn't learn their lessons before that. I mean, wildfire is pretty much a common thing in California. Like every summer, there's big fires all around my house. And so it's not uncommon. I think it's the same as a hurricane for you, basically.
Right.
You know,
Right.
yeah,
We get them. Now let me ask you in difference, like with hurricanes, to my knowledge, there is literally nothing we can do to prevent a hurricane from hitting Florida.
yeah.
Is that the same? Like, are there management practices that can be implemented that would at least bring it down the risk of
Yeah.
having a wildfire down to almost, hey, we're not going to have one, or is it kind of inevitable?
It's inevitable, but you definitely can mitigate risk. Like there's definitely things where the government Cal Fire is responsible for clearing a certain amount of acreage, and and I was just looking at this article from 2020 where Newsom had just kind of come into office, and we had that Paradise Fire that burned down the entire town, and it was PG&E that started it. It was our a gas company, basically our power and gas company, started it with power transmission lines that broke during high winds,
Hmm.
sparked a fire in the forest. And basically so isn't in the only way that you would have fixed that is to put all the power lines underground, and the cost for that no one wants to pay.
Right.
So it's like, I don't know about that. So but PG&E was held responsible for those fires, and it basically bankrupted the company. But the government, I don't know if it's true in all states, but the government in California is heavily in bed with the Public Utilities Commission, the PUC, and they manage the utilities because basically utility commissions are a monopoly. You
Hmm.
don't usually have more than one or two power companies in your area. And so the government heavily regulates that. They regulate how much power how much you can charge for it, how much percent of profit you can have, and
Hmm.
all this kind of stuff. And so they couldn't let it was too big to fail, kind of a thing.
Right.
And so California, the bill for that fire was something like $18 billion or 28 billion. I mean, it was some astronomical sum of money, and that even the state of California didn't have just laying around. And so essentially California sort of bailed them out with tax money, and then the ratepayers all got the shaft. And so California electric bills are absolutely through the roof
Hmm.
because we're basically still paying back that $18 billion loss, to the people, essentially. And so it's a new tax, but hidden in your utility bill, basically, in the form of overpriced power, essentially. So, and there is some rumblings that Southern California Edison is maybe responsible for some of the fires that just happened in Southern California, and so we might be into the same uh, crap all over again. And it just means that everybody's rates are going to go up because it's basically they're socializing the whole system through this monopolistic
Breaking up there.
power
There you go.
company. Yeah. So yeah, so that's,
Gotcha.
I mean, and yeah, mitigation. Like this one article that I'm reading here, it basically, Newsom was saying how he had carried out all these projects and cleared 90,000 acres or something like that. And then when they like really looked into it, he had like cleared 25,000 acres, and and he even defunded the Cal Fire budget
Hmm.
to move the money to some other shenanigans that California is pushing at the moment. uh so it's yeah, they definitely could do better, and Newsom is he's a pile. That part of the issue. So I guess one thing I'll say is that I live in an area on the hills. In I live in a very scary wildfire kind of situation. My house is like definitely on target for burning down in a wildfire.
Hmm.
And I've had insurance for 25 years that I've lived here, and recently the insurance company started canceling everybody. And I thought, well, that's crazy. And then I couldn't get insurance. Like, there's literally no one to buy fire insurance from. And so it's everybody else was having the same problem. So the state of California stepped in and created its own insurance company, basically
Hmm.
called Fire Safe or First Safe or some stupid crap like that.
Okay.
And basically, that's your only option. And it is a last ditch effort, where the state is going to cover you if you lose your house, and you pay a premium like you would in a regular insurance policy, but
Mhm.
it's super bare bones, and it's kind of on the back of the taxpayer if they can't. The way insurance companies work is if they can't pay out, then they're out of business, right?
Right.
But if the state of California is backing you and they can't pay out, they just raise taxes and then they pay out, right?
Right.
So it's basically insurance on the back of all the citizens, and yeah, it's just really bad. And the reason why that came about, and I think this is key and super important, is that apparently news. So after that fire in Paradise where they burned down the whole thing, the insurance company said, I'm not gonna insure people that live in this particular like stage 4 wildfire area. So they have wildfire maps of like where's the most uh, risky areas to live in. That's how insurance companies usually work. They figure out
Right.
where's the most risk. And so they have these maps, and they go by the maps, and they're like, okay, we're not insuring people in these things. And then Newsom, he said, oh well, I'm the authoritarian prince here, and so I'm going to tell you that in order to, and because I control the insurance commission in California, because I get to determine, my commission determines what rates you can charge and whether you can do business here or not. Um, I'm going to tell you that you have to insure those people. And if you don't insure those people, you can't do business in California. And so the insurance companies are like, well, then we won't do business in California. So they started pulling out, and that was the beginning of the end, because then the competition went away, right?
Mhm.
And then he said, then the ones that were still there said, well, we'll only insure the people that are in these lower areas of the fire map. And
Mhm.
then Newsom said, what's funny is I get to control where the fire map lines are. And
Oh,
so he
cool.
redrew the fire map lines to include all the way down to the beach, basically. And then he's like, so now what are you going to do? Because you can't discriminate, right? So he's like, now those people are all in the same, there's no fire line anymore. And so now, insurance company, you're forced to like give insurance to the people that I want you to give it to. And they basically just started walking. And so that's why we're in the situation we have now, where people are losing their insurance if they can even get it. A lot of the people in those homes in Southern California are on this fire first thing because they all lost their insurance in the last couple of years.
Mhm.
And so there is something like $40 billion worth of losses, or $50 billion worth of losses from this fire, which is vastly bigger than the last one that we had,
Mhm.
because this is all $1 million mansions for the Hollywood celebrities, and so I don't know that California even has that money to pay.
Wow.
So I think it might bankrupt, and then we'll see what they do with the taxes and try to claw it back. And then I read something about, in this fire safe insurance that you sign up for, it says that they can reassess the rate every year based on what happened in the previous year's fire season. So
Mhm.
I'm expecting my rate to like double, and I'm just going to take a guess, but I'm not 100% sure. I think my fire insurance for this last year on this house was something like $10,000.
Right.
So maybe it's $20,000. There's a certain point where people are just like, I can't pay that.
Right.
I'm out. And then you get to this weird thing of like, then the house burns down, and it's like, is the government responsible for fixing your house if you can't afford fire insurance, right? So, and they'll be shouting for that, but I personally don't believe that. If I believe that we have to help people when there's a natural disaster, but it's a weird line here.
Yeah. So let me ask then, um, when it comes to mitigation, right? Like
Yeah.
preventing a wildfire from either getting too crazy, too big, too ginormous, or preventing them from starting in the first place. Um, in an ideal world, do you think that good practices could lead to a situation where insurance companies are willing to insure homes,
Hmm.
maybe at variable rates? Hey,
Yeah.
you live in a very woodsy area, and whatever, and you live dead in the city. So, and I'm
Yeah.
presuming that those would be affected dramatically different. Like could that be the case in an ideal world, Or are we dealing with something where, just as a matter of flat reality, homes are going to burn, fires are going to happen, and insurance companies may just simply say, this is just too costly no matter what?
Yeah. Well, so being in a place where my house can burn down at any minute, I'm very conscious of looking at data and ideas on how to like make my house more secure, right? And I think this is one of those. This is a very libertarian thing. I think it comes down to personal responsibility, right? And
Okay.
like whether you're going to take care of your surroundings. Like one of the things I read out of this fire is you'll see that there's like whole blocks burned down, and then there'll be one house standing there,
Right.
and so the insurance companies go in there and try to figure out why is that house still there. And sometimes it's just luck of the draw, the wind changed at the last minute and didn't like hit that house or whatever. But one of the things that they were talking about was the immediate 5 foot space around your house. If there's any vegetation and you have a firestorm like this, even green, really green, lush bushes will catch fire and then catch the side of your house on fire. So you have to remove all flammable objects within 5 feet of your house was basically what they were recommending. And so there is my group, my community that I live in, they have signed up with some other kind of fire safe California or something like that. And essentially it's like best practices of clearing the brush around your house and on your property and doing the things that you can do.
Mhm.
I have a swimming pool. And so I bought a giant industrial pump that I can dump a hose right into the swimming pool, 2-inch hose, fire hose. And then it has a hose coming out the other side. So I can literally use my entire pool to hose off my house if there's a fire on the hillside. And so, but you can do all that stuff. And if the firestorm is too gnarly, you're not standing there to put out your,
Sure.
So I think it's definitely personal responsibility as usual is a critical factor. And then I think that what's going to come out of this is the government's going to react to this with a lot more housing zoning laws and
Mhm.
like things that you can put on your property and how you can do things. And, this fire, especially the pictures coming out of Southern California for the Pacific Palisades, I would have never expected. This is just like a town that goes down to the beach. It's not
Mhm.
even in the woods. It's like tract homes, like one after another. It's like, if you saw a huge 2,000 unit tract home area and that all burned to the ground, you would be kind of like, wait, how did that happen? So the fire must have been incredibly intense to
Mhm.
burn all the way to the beach like that across a road and then burn houses that are stucco on the sand, right? Like that was a freak of nature. But there's no doubt about it. Gavin Newsom and government have exacerbated the problem. They are spending massive amounts of taxpayer dollars on literally nothing as usual. They tell you they're going to fix the problem. He's been telling us he's going to fix the problem since 2020 when this was his number one priority.
Right.
We're still here, bro. We're still
Right.
burning to the ground. Thanks very much. And what did you do? Spend,
Right.
billions of dollars on mitigation that just didn't do crap. And you drove the insurance company like I would like to be able to buy insurance from anywhere in the world. I should be able to transact with any insurance company anywhere in the world. The competition would come in and they would be like, look, Lars mitigated his house, so we are going to insure him instead of this blanket like we're not insuring people. And so then
Right.
and once you get that competition going, then it's on me as an individual to make my house as safe as possible so that I can get qualified for the insurance because it's a business transaction, right?
Mhm.
I'm transacting with a private company to insure my house against loss, but the government is breaking the market once again by monopolizing it. The insurance commission and all this stuff just it broke the market. And so what's his thing today? His thing today is a mandate from Governor Authoritarian Newsom that California issues an executive order to prompt regulatory action to stop insurers from canceling policies.
Right.
What? Wait, what? Like, all you're doing is breaking the system more,
Right.
right? It's unbelievable, and it's like after the fact,
Right.
right?
So let me ask you another question here, because and I'm asking you because I assume that you're going to have better answers because you live out there. You've been living there for at least 25 years, if not your whole life.
Yeah.
Um, and so my understanding is that California has in certain areas, or maybe the statewide, I'm not really sure, but home prices are astronomical.
Yep.
And I presume, based on information that I've read, that they're astronomical because of government policies. So when the prices are astronomical, at least in part to government,
Yeah.
regulation, whatnot. So when the prices are higher, then that means the insurance, I presume, will be higher because there's
Yeah.
more cost to deal with.
Sure.
So are there are there things that maybe the local governments can do, the state governments can do, in terms of regulation that would help lower the cost of housing,
Hmm.
which then would help lower the risk or that insurance companies have to bear?
Yeah, I don't see any lowering ever occurring of the cost of housing. It's kind of we have built-in inflation in America, so I think the housing prices are going to keep going up. And it literally in California, it's just supply and demand.
Mhm,
I live in a beach town. You have the ocean on one side, and then it's backed up by mountains on the other side. So there's not a ton of buildable land,
mhm.
but it's one of these places like everybody wants to live here, and
Okay.
there's only enough room. Like they're starting to build like 10-story skyscrapers in my town, which like no one. It's a tiny little beach town. Like it's like it's no one ever expected that to happen. But I mean, that's kind of the only option for getting more housing is to build up. And there's just a lot of demand. I think the median price home in my town right now is something like $1.3 million.
Mhm,
And there's lots of 5 and 10 and $15 million houses laying around. So, um, I think I just had I had a tree cleave one of my garages in half while I was on the campaign trail, and that was a year ago. And I'm just getting the permits now.
mhm,
I've been in the permit process for an entire year, and my particular county has more people working in the planning department than the big city San Jose over the hill that has 2 million people living there, and I have like 100,000 people living, but we have more people in our planning department. It's just government bureaucracy in the way. It's needless bureaucracy. The stuff that they're nickel and diming me on is not going to do anything for anybody's safety or any of that kind of stuff. It's just literally to keep their jobs going and
mhm,
keep their fiefdom going. So they could certainly relax regulations. There's also a fight between the state and local governments. So the local governments don't want any building. They want less people moving into their town. They
right,
like the way it is. And the state is like, no, we have to have more stuff. And so there's actually been a lot of lawsuits between cities and the state. And Newsom basically said, okay, cities, you don't get a choice anymore. These are the new zoning laws. We're overriding all your stuff, and if you can't get a permit within this certain period of time, you can come to the state, and the state will just issue you one. So it's just a mess over here, and it's literally bureaucracies fighting bureaucracies because it's government on top of government, and
mm.
that's all they really know.
Let me put something up on the screen. This comes from Donald Trump. He posted this to Truth Social on the 8th, of this month,
Okay.
and, I wanna get your take on it. Let's see. There it is. It should pop up right, let's see here. Give me a second. I think it's this one. There we go. Okay, so I'll read it because you won't be able to see all of it just because I don't know how to move all the screens
Sure.
in this new Rumble Studio just yet. But it says Governor Gavin Newsom refused to sign the water restoration declaration put before him that would have allowed millions of gallons of water from excess rain and snowmelt from the north to flow daily into many parts of California, including the areas that are currently burning in a virtually apocalyptic way. He wanted to protect an essentially worthless fish called a smelt by giving it less water. It didn't work, but didn't care about the people of California. Now the ultimate price is being paid. I will demand that this incompetent governor allow beautiful, clean, fresh water to flow into California. He is the blame for this. On top of it all, no water for fire hydrants, no firefighting planes, a true disaster. What's your take on that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we California has a long history of water fighting.
Mhm.
Essentially, the entire eastern half of California is farmers, and
Mhm.
they're all Republican, and all the Democrats live on the coast, right?
Mhm.
And so the Democrats that live on the coast need the water from the Republican area, and so they've been battling for like 50 years over water.
Mhm.
And then you have all the environmentalists that will block you from building a new dam or diverting water from one area to another because of this fish. I mean, that's totally true that they do that kind of stuff all the time. They will, they will definitely put the fish before the people. Absolutely, 100% of the time. And so uh there was even talk at some point about splitting California into 6 new states,
Mhm.
because basically because of water rights, because the blue areas on the coast steal all the water from the red areas. The farmers basically get pissed off because the water that they have gets taken from them by the government and sent to LA. And apparently they didn't divert enough water or something. There's a giant aquifer that goes from Northern California all the way down the middle of the state. It's like a highway of water, literally, like 20 feet deep, and then it gets down to Bakersfield, where it's pumped over the top of the mountain into LA in these giant tubes of water. So LA gets a lot of its water from there. It also they get water from I believe the Colorado River, out of Vegas area. They divert water in that direction too. So it's a big fight. Water's an issue. A drought's a real issue. I mean, we go through periods of time. When I was a kid in the 70s, they had a slogan. If it's brown, flush it down. If it's yellow, let it mellow.
Mhm.
Because
Okay.
literally, like, we had to conserve water rationing. Um, and that's a whole nother, I could get it all into that. That's a whole nother thing that just pisses me off
So
because
so was that a government
yes,
initiated,
yes.
um, slogan?
Well, I don't know if it was a government slogan, but
Okay.
all the water is it just like the electricity company. All the water companies in California are government regulated.
Right.
Any private water company that comes up, they basically just buy it out and then
Mhm.
control it. So now it's down to just a few different things. It's really interesting because I live on a property with a well. I live far enough out in the bushes that I have a well, and the local water company keeps sending me letters, and they're like, "Well, would you like us to put a meter on your well so that you can know how much water you're using?" And I'm like, "You don't want that so I can know how much water I'm using. You want that so you can know how much water
Right.
because
So
I'm
later they can
basically
tax you.
drawing. Yeah, I'm drawing from the same aquifer as they are, and
Oh,
they have a limit on how much everybody else can use, but I'm unlimited because I'm on my own well, right? And so they're trying to pass all kinds of stuff to basically regulate anybody with a well, because it's the common water under the ground or some crap, and so it's just it's regulation after regulation in California. It's maddening.
that's wild. Are people in California very similar to people in Florida? So, like, when hurricanes come, we have a reputation here in Florida that people will not leave their house. Like, especially older people. Well, maybe not all, but like people that have been living in Florida for a while and have went through hurricanes will be like, ah, I've been through 12 hurricanes. I'm not
Yeah,
leaving. This is my house, yada yada. And they will issue like orders, if you will, for evacuation orders. And then they'll like, I remember during one of the hurricanes here in Jacksonville, our mayor explicitly said, like, look, if you don't leave, we're not coming to get you, which I
yeah,
was like, no, that seems fair. Like you told people like, hey, we're not going to come get you. We're giving you fair warning, to leave, to evacuate. And if you don't, we're not risking other lives to come and get you. So you're making a conscious, and I like, like good, bad, or indifferent. I'm okay with that. Do people do the same thing in California, or are they a little bit more like, now let's get the hell out of here?
I think for earthquakes the answer is yes. For fire, because fire like won't come to your area for I haven't had a fire, knock on wood, right in my immediate vicinity in
Mhm.
all the time I've ever lived here. But 5 miles up the road, yes, right. And
Right.
so if I got an evacuation order, uh, I would probably try to judge it as best as I could, knowing I have that fire system, and I would probably get the rest of my family out, and I would probably stay behind, and then you know, make sure that I had an exit path or hop in the pool. I guess if it got really ugly, and even people that have hopped in their pool die from, you know, smoke asphyxiation and stuff like that.
Right.
So, but I think for the most part, people leave. I had some friends that were in Southern California just 2 days ago in a new fire, and they were told to evacuate, and they evacuated. So I think that they do that. But for earthquake, you don't know it's coming. Maybe there's a
Right.
little bit of a warning, but most people don't even run outside or anything. They just
Right.
ride it out and be like, "Oh, there's an earthquake," you know?
Mhm. I gotcha. I heard a story a while back, and from a libertarian perspective, to see if you agree with me, it was about drones. And apparently, people fly drones, which, like, I saw some video footage from a drone, and it was horrifying because it like went up in the air and it was just showing this like giant, like not even a city block, it was like city blocks.
Yeah,
It was like just burned to the ground.
yeah,
And I was like, "That's horrifying looking." And I kind of appreciated, because it gave me a little perspective of what's going on out there. Like like I know what a neighborhood should look like, and to see it all burned down, I can like, wow, that's pretty
yeah,
wild. But I've read some stories where, and I do bill reviews on this show on a regular basis. Normally, probably like 95% of the bills that I review, I dismiss and I say it's not a good bill. Gavin Newsom recently signed a bill, I believe, or it was going to his desk. He might have signed, or maybe he signed it in the past. I can't remember exactly. But there was a bill that would allow emergency personnel to destroy any drones that they came across, and then I think there was like a punishment if they caught you. Because what caught my attention, I was listening to some news, and they were talking about using resources to go to like scour the internet and say, okay, here's some video footage. Let's go see if we can't hunt down and figure out who produced this video footage, and let's go get them. And
yeah,
initially, I was like, that seems terrible. It seems like you need to focus on the fire. But then I read into it more, and apparently a drone can ground emergency personnel or even cause them to crash. So then I
yeah,
was all like, well, in that case, I didn't realize they were that dangerous. And I was like, well, in that case, yeah, swat
yeah,
them out of the sky if you got to, punish people. Because at the end of the day, like if we're gonna send rescue people to rescue people,
yeah,
um, and other people are getting in the way, with their toys and whatnot,
right,
well, then your toys gotta go. And
yeah.
maybe you should be punished because you are literally getting in, you could cause somebody's death.
Yeah, have you
Uh,
ever
what's your take?
you've seen, like, firefighters sometimes will be in, like, a city or something, and they're gonna and they gotta get to a fire hydrant,
Mhm.
and some jackass parked in front of the fire hydrant, and you've seen as, like, a F you to the guy that parked in front of the fire hydrant, they'll run the hose through the guy's windows. They'll smash the windows and run the hose through the
Like
middle of
on
the car.
purpose?
Yeah, yeah, on purpose, right? To kinda show them, like, you know, "You're a jerk for parking here,"
Right,
right? There's a reason we don't let you park in front of the fire hydrants because
right,
we gotta get to the water, right? Um, I think that this, like, I don't know if they passed that bill or whatever. I think it's kinda like that, is, like, you're probably fine flying your drone, but if you know that there's, like, aircraft coming in and you're still flying it, then you probably, you know, you're probably asking for trouble, right? Like
mhm,
you're like, and and I don't know if people should be like crazily fined. I guess maybe that stops them, but I doubt it stops people, right? It's like everything else, right? It's like, um, but if you cause somebody to wreck, or you cause something bad to happen because you were flying your drone, well, you should be held responsible for that,
right,
right? Like, so it's kind of the same, you know, thing on all sides, is that it's personal responsibility. If you're flying your drone and you're being a jackass, you deserve to have your thing shot out of the sky. If you're flying your drone and it's super low and you're like on your own personal property,
right, right.
I
Yeah.
don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, and I think there's a little bit of subjectivity there, like
Right,
how high is the
100%.
drone, whose property is it, are there
Yeah,
aircraft in the area? But ultimately, if it comes down to, like it was kind of weird because the not no offense, but the last state that I thought that I would actually agree to a bill to be California, and especially with Governor Newsom at the helm, because I'm like, every time and I don't want this to turn into a bashing Governor Newsom,
Well,
but he
we
makes it
should.
so
At
easy.
every chance, we should bash Governor
But he
Newsom.
makes
But
it so easy because, like, I saw a news story where the state of California spent like $24 billion to deal with homelessness, and they can't account for it
yeah,
because they stopped tracking it.
yeah,
And then on top of that, homelessness increased
hmm
50%.
yeah, yeah,
And then somebody put together one of those montages where they go back through history, and they've got like a date, or not a full date, but just a year, and it shows like over the years where Newsom is like, "Yeah, we're gonna take care of the homeless problem," and it was like a 10-year period or something like that,
yeah,
where he keeps talking about, we're gonna do something with the homelessness problem, and then they lose. I mean, effectively, they didn't really lose it. Somebody got it, but they lose basically $24 billion, and then it goes up.
yeah.
And I'm just like,
Oh, if we just spend a
wow.
little more money, if we just spend a little more of your money, we can fix the problem. And it's clear that it's not going to fix the problem. Homelessness is really challenging. If it was easy to fix, it would already be fixed, right?
Right.
I think the thing that drove home to me on, and this is kind of like super sidetracked, but the thing that drove home to me on the homeless issue um, is there was a doctor at our local ER who had been there for 30 years or something like that. And on his retirement, he wrote a letter about homelessness, and that there was basically three types of homeless people. There was chronically homeless that want to be homeless, and nothing you can do for them will cause them to not be homeless. There was another group of people that were like, you know, mentally ill and drug addict people that could potentially get out of homelessness if they had solution. And then there was a third group of people that were the actual people that were homeless because they lost their job and they couldn't pay their rent, and they want to actually get back into the regular workings of society. And those people, at least in my town, anybody that wants to get back in the regular workings of society are helped out voluntarily
Mhm.
through everybody in my town, and they will get back in the shape that they need to do. The ones that are left on the street are basically mentally ill, drug addicts, and people that literally don't want to sleep indoors. They like the lifestyle of sleeping, there. And when watch a show called Seattle is Dying on
Mhm.
YouTube. I think it's a really great show. It kind of highlights how Seattle spent $100,000 a person trying to house people. Um, Still couldn't house them, and I was like, really? Because you could just buy a hotel and just put them in there for that kind of money. They
Right.
spent $1 billion on trying to fix homelessness, and it ended up there's like the homeless industrial complex, and you literally had groups of people fighting over who was going to get the money to take care of the homeless people. And so much so that they started locking each other out of the houses that were available so
Wow.
that the other people couldn't get to them and get the money from the government. I mean, it's asinine, and it just it just shows how completely broken the system is when you're using other people's money and you have no uh, need to be, to do good, to excel. And that's why I always say government breeds mediocrity, because the more government you have, the more mediocre we become.
Right. Well, I want you to be very careful by when you talk about mediocrity. A notable person recently talked about mediocrity in America, and he got in a lot of trouble when he said that. So be careful saying that. But we got to get going here because I've got to run, and I know that you've probably got some things to do. So tell me from a libertarian perspective. Now, I'm not asking you to necessarily solve all of the wildfire problems and say, hey, from a libertarian perspective, you could do these things,
Yeah,
and poof, the problem
yeah,
goes away. But what I'd like you to do is say, here are some things that are libertarian in nature. These are ideas that libertarians can accept
yeah.
that would go a long way toward improving the situation when it comes to like wildfires.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you know, I think a lot of it's just education.
Mhm.
Um there's no one's ever come to my door. The fire department's come to my door a couple times, and they do a look around my property and go, "Oh, you're doing pretty good. You might want to trim up that tree or something like that." But I've never really had a group of people come to my house and say, "These are the things that you should do to mitigate your stuff." It's stuff. It's on me as an individual to go out and find that information, and
Mhm.
it's not necessarily easy. So I think that that's one thing. If we're going to spend the money on cleaning up the forest, raking the forest, whatever you want to call it, right?
Mhm.
Then gosh, let's do it in an efficient manner,
Mhm.
instead of just saying you're doing it and then not doing it. And I think what's going to happen here is the government's going to get heavy-handed with regulations, and I don't know that that's the solution. It probably isn't the solution. But I think it comes down to personal responsibility for your property. And but I did see this guy basically said it didn't matter how good you did for your property if your neighbors weren't doing the same thing. If your property's all cleaned up but the guy next door to you has tumbleweeds all around his house, it makes your property less safe, right?
Right.
And so it takes community, it takes us organizing together. And I know the people in my area, there's like 300 houses. I know that they've had meetings for fire safety and to talk about that kind of stuff. So the voluntary action is there, and it's coming, and I think you'll probably see more of it. And I guess that's the solution: is voluntary action to protect yourself and inform your neighbors about the potential possibility. It's just like if you're having a hurricane and you know that you have an elderly couple next door, you might go knock on their door and say, "Do you guys need help getting out of here?" Maybe the guy's in a walker or something like that. So
Mhm.
it's voluntary action, I think, is what it comes down to, is going to be the real solution to these problems. And everybody kind of doing their part instead of relying on daddy government to come and fix it for us, because we already see that that's not happening. We've got 25 years of fires, and the daddy government hasn't fixed it yet, but they sure spent a lot of our money. So I think the reality of it is we just got to get more people to be voluntarist and fix their own crap, basically.
Right. And what it sounds like earlier when we were talking about the insurance, if the government would stay out of the insurance, then the insurance could have conversations with homeowners and say,
Yeah.
look, if you want us to insure your property, here are the things you need to do. Like, for instance, and I'll give you the last word here in just a moment. Somebody came to my house one time and she knocked on the door and she said, "Hey, I'm with the insurance company. Do you mind if I look around?" And we verified that she was. And I said, "Sure, go ahead." And she did. And then she left and she didn't even say anything to me. And then, like, a couple weeks later, in one particular gutter happened to have some vegetation grown out of it just because of how close the trees were and just some other stuff. And it was funny because, like, a week later was like my time to go out there and clean it out. So I went and I cleaned it out and I'm like, all right, cool. And then, like, a week after that, I get a letter and they're like, "Hey, we're going to drop you from your insurance because you've got, unkept gutters." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "I just cleaned them last week." And I was like, and but again, that's how these things can play out. The insurance company
Yeah.
was like, "Hey, we don't like what we see, so we're going to let you go." And, if the government was like, "No, you have to insure DL," well, then now I'm not responsible necessarily to clean out my gutters or whatever the case is.
100%.
And so I think what you're saying there, the voluntary is, community working with each other, but then also, hey, pull back and let the market work.
100%.
Right.
100%. That they broke the insurance market. Just like the whole healthcare fiasco, they
Mhm.
broke the insurance market, right? By making everybody have insurance, by forcing insurance companies to cover people that they didn't want to cover, they broke the insurance market for healthcare. It's the same thing with this kind of thing. Let the market work. The market, like you just said, the market would fix it, because the insurance companies would come around and say, "I'm not insuring you if you don't clean up your crap,"
Mhm.
right? And then if they're telling everybody that, then people are like, "Wow, I really want still insurance, so I'm going to clean up my crap." Then all the houses are cleaned up. But like you said, if the government is just like, "Oh, we'll cover you, don't worry about it," then you have no incentive to be
Right.
excellent.
Right. All right. Any last words, sir?
No, that's it. I'm thanks so much for having me on, and I appreciate it a lot.
All right. Well, I'm gonna put you backstage or whatever it looks like. And then I'm gonna close out the show. If you're still there when I get off, we can chit chat for a minute. If not, good luck to you, sir, as you brave the wildfires and then as you work on your endeavors with ballot access.
Thank you so much.
All right, folks. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. I know it was a bit later than typical, but he is on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast. So we had to adapt for time because I know it may seem crazy, but he just probably didn't want to get up 3 hours earlier than 7:30, which would be like 4:30. He didn't want, like, who wants to get up at 4:30 for a podcast, right? Like, if I was Joe Rogan, maybe. But until then, we got to make some adaptations here, and we did. So thank you for watching. Hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer, my Rumble channel. You can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you are there, leave me a comment. Let me know how I'm doing. You can also head on over to libertydad.locals.com. That's where you can sign up and become part of the community, and we will chit chat and talk about the direction of the show, the things that I talk about, maybe response videos, guests that I get on, that sort of thing. Last but not least, I want you to remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you tomorrow. But for now, I'm out.